Welcome everybody. Please come on in. It is Ellie's exclusives, and this is part one, also episode one of Ellie's exclusives on the Banner and Backbone channel and network. And today's part one of the
There we
Ghislaine Maxwell depositions. And Ellie has been doing an incredible deep dive and transcription of those depositions to glean new information, to identify something, and hopefully glean out something new that we haven't seen in the public sphere that's already there, because new eyes offer new opinions and new views. And Ellie's is one that we trust. And she puts out incredibly great analytic and smart information. So we have started the new Muckraker Extraordinaires show on the Banner and Backbone Network, the Ellie's exclusive. So welcome.
It's like entertainment tonight. Hi. How are you?
I'm doing well. I tried to do something a little like journalistic in the way I
Yeah,
am this one, because I wanted to, like, the topics that we're going to be covering in a lot of these, especially today, like, these are really serious topics. And I
Right.
don't want to make light of those topics, or
I
especially
know.
because this is all about the victims. But you deserve like a journalistic title of sorts, because
Name tag.
as much as you like don't call yourself a journalist
Yeah.
these days, you are.
Well, thank you. That's what everybody else do. I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, you don't have to say it. I'll say it for you. You're a journalist
you.
and you're doing great at it.
Thank you.
And I'm proud to work with you. So
Thank you. I'm proud to work with you too.
thanks. I'm glad we can do this. So welcome everybody.
Hi guys.
Ellie's going to give us like I said, Ellie's going to give us a really good deep dive today. And one of the things that I would love to do today, while we're all here, is first, please join the Banner and Backbone network. You'll see here in just a second, Banner and we make it as easy as possible. It's bannerandbackbone.com. Please join us. Ellie is one of our main contributors. She puts out a ton of content that is incredibly powerful, like I've already said. And we want to make sure that she gets all the time and the air that she can to get it all out there. And so, Ellie, the floor is really yours in all of this. But please join us on the Banner and Backbone Network. I'm going to be monitoring the chat today while Ellie's talking, and I'm going to be responding back to Ellie. Please, if you have questions in the chat, start your comment with a Q and like some big indicator, just a capital Q, so that I know you have a question. And we will ask Ellie questions about what she's investigating, what she's found, and we're going to see if we can poke some more holes into the story that has come out, and reveal some more truths. Because as the Washington Post claimed, democracy dies in darkness. We're not going to let it get dark.
Yeah, well, and the Washington Post. The Washington Post turned off the lights. Okay. So I guess my stance on this is, I am a transcriber by trade. That is my small business. That's what I do. That's how I've made my connections that I have into media and journalism, not being a journalist myself. And when I saw these depositions come out, I'm guessing it was the night before last. I don't think it was yesterday.
It was Friday. Yeah.
It was Friday. Okay. I was like, I can listen to them or I can read the transcripts. But the way that I end up knowing the most about a case is if I listen and type it up myself. And I also know that transcripts, depending on who does them, are generally poorly constructed.
Yeah.
So I was like, I am willing to bet there are mistakes made in this transcript. And I don't think they're purposeful mistakes by any means, but I think they had to get them out really quickly. And I don't think that and this is not to toot my own horn, but I don't think there's a lot of really, really, really good transcribers who've been doing it a long time and have an ear for, when we mumble or when people have accents or when it's hard to hear something. And I've been doing this for a very long time, and I usually am able to pick apart the things that most people can't hear. So I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm going to retranscribe the whole thing and just see what was missed, and also get a sense of what we're dealing with here. Which I'm really glad that they didn't just release the transcript. I'm glad they released the audio as well, because you start to hear the tone and the emotion of the conversation and who's manipulating and where they're going with it. And I started off last night by I was just going out to coffee at like 9 o'clock at night, as I do, and I made a little TikTok, and I'm not a big TikToker, but I was just like, this whole thing is bothering me. Because the things she's saying, I mean, are obviously lies. There's no reason for her to tell the truth at this point, other than she can perjure herself, which is something that I didn't realize. I thought her immunity protected her from perjuring herself. It doesn't. If she lies, supposedly, she can get in trouble for it, even in these depositions, and even with immunity. But she's obviously lying. Like there's so many receipts that she's lying about. But her ability to manipulate and her theatrical presence in these conversations was impressive. I mean, she's a good actress. And so I thought, where is my head going to be after I've been listening to these? How convincible am I, having known all this information already ahead of time? Is she going to start to sway me? And I did feel moments where I was just like, oh, all of a sudden I'm feeling empathetic towards this woman because she's a good actress. But then I had to be like, nope, screech the brakes. I already know that that piece of information is totally false. Like I know what she's saying in this moment is totally false. And so what I did is I went through the way the deposition is set up. It was recorded over 2 days, and it was separated into 6 to 7 parts per day. So they're long days. So I last night just went over the first section of the first day,
Okay.
and I typed it up, and I went through to get kind of specific things that stood out to me. So that's basically what we're going to do here today.
Okay.
So
Awesome. So before we
yeah,
go
so
any further,
yeah, go for it.
can can I ask you so that
Hmm.
because I know some of the answers to this because
Right.
I worked in the Intel field and it's fairly similar to some of the stuff that people in Intel do
Hmm.
is transcribing audio recordings and listen to audio and sounding for tone. Can you explain to everyone here with us though what the purpose, what you are looking for in the purpose of what you're doing when you're
Hmm.
transcribing, so that everyone can also get a sense of like how you approach a
Hmm.
transcription and what it really means to be a transcriber, just sort of in general.
Sure. So a transcriber is a fly on the wall, and they're probably the number one person who knows the most about any investigation, any movie, documentary, history, story. I always thought it was kind of strange that when people like TMZ or someone wants to know information that's not on the record, they don't look for the transcribers, because the transcribers know everything. Obviously, I myself would not divulge information. I'm usually locked under NDAs. But when you watch a documentary film that is purposeful, they're trying to make a point, like maybe they're talking about, um, like I did one that talked about the dangers of laparoscopic robotic surgeries on people's bodies. I will hear everybody's 150 hours of interviews. I will hear good arguments for laparoscopic robotic surgery, but that won't go into the film because um, that doesn't make the point of the person making the film. So when I listen to interviews for a project or an article or something, I get to hear the whole big picture before it's kind of simplified into the structure of the argument of whoever is making this project. And so there is no bias when I usually get the interviews. By that point, there's no bias. It's just the whole thing. What I knew going into this was that that part had already been done. Bias was already in these interviews as we are receiving them publicly. And the reason why they're not just giving us the transcript, but they're giving the audio is for that very reason. They know the bias is in her tone. They know the bias is in the conversation. They know how easily a human can be swayed by emotion, And thus they let us have the audio as well. There was no reason to give us both, but they're doing it because they know that we're easily manipulated. And so if we hear real people having real conversations versus reading it on a page, we're much more easily manipulated. And so I knew that going into this. I knew when we got these depositions that there is intent behind them, there's manipulation behind them. So I kind of went into them going like, okay, I want to know what that is. I want to know what their angle is. I have a hunch, I know what it is, but I want to hear it like on the table. Now, it does say that these have been redacted. I haven't gotten to any points that have been redacted yet, so I'm curious at what point they'll do that. Um, and I do notice that she starts to say things, and Blanche will cut her off when things start to go in a certain direction, and he never gets back to those topics. So I do know that it is a manipulated conversation for a purpose, and it's not to provide us with information. Let's put it that way. So that's kind of my intent going in as a transcriber objectively.
Okay. So we've had a couple questions in the audience before we actually get into any of the like meat of what you've been doing. And I think I want to get to at least one or two of them before we go further, because two definitely apply right now. Is from the outset, before we get into any of the information, based on tone, based on like um how the conversation was stopped, breaking points that you've heard so
Mm-hmm.
far. One of the questions we've had from Peter in the chat was Maxwell coached? And from before you get into any of the meat of it, does it feel like she was coached not only by, I'll expand on it, was she coached
Yeah.
not only by her lawyer, but does it
Mm-hmm.
feel like she was also coached by the Department of Justice lawyers or
Yes.
their side of the house?
Yes, 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 yes. All the yes. She has had 4 years in prison to prepare for this. So it's smooth. I mean, she has a smooth presentation. You will hear her lawyer. She has two lawyers, a female and a male. And I'm forgetting their names right now, but when she forgets to mention something, they'll pop in and say, "Remember, you were going to mention this." So, I mean, she's clearly been coached by them. Which is, that's what any good lawyer will do is they sit down and they
Yeah.
make a game plan. Um, but you can tell when she starts to say something, there's a little bit of just like you can feel a little tension, um, and then the conversation will change, and Todd Blanche will be the one changing, and it's like me as the listener, I'm going, wait, no, she was just about to say something, but you can feel in the room that everybody had. I mean, this is why we're not seeing it and why we're only hearing it is there are glances that are being made, which means move along. We're not talking about that, but they don't want to say that in the audio. They don't want to have that on the record for then someone to say, why did you move on here? Why didn't you discuss that? Because they don't have a judge in it. There's no judge to say overruled, scratch that from the record. There's nobody like that. It's just a room full of lawyers.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That's a
Hmm.
that's a good answer. And also thank you for the question, Peter. Appreciate it. Please keep asking questions in the chat. If you have one, start your conversation or your chat message with a Q, and I'll add it. I've got a doc going to try and ask Ellie questions along the way as we go. Next one is this was a new question in the chat, was have from so far, just from what you've done on sort of like a data side of like
Hmm.
tracking where things are and how the conversation flows, is someone asked, have you kept track of where Todd Blanche cuts her off and never lets her return to an answer?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and are you correlating those? Like, are you able to correlate those to a specific topic that he always cuts
Hmm.
her off on?
Mm, hmm. I have I think with the first transcript that I did, I was more listening and just noticing these things, and now I'm starting to do the second transcript, and I'm being more careful about, like, highlighting something as, like, I need to go back and look at this. So I think I didn't think they were gonna be so stark, and
Hmm.
the first time around, I didn't do that. I noticed them. I clearly noticed them, and then I went back and I took notes on it, but I didn't, like, highlight it and mark it as I was going, and now I'm gonna be doing more of that. Um, I think I think it's just when you hear her start to say something that a little bit of the money stuff and then a little bit of just when it's if it's a, I don't know. It feels like if it's something that could get her in trouble, it just really gets softened. The blow really gets softened, and they start to reword it to take her in another direction. And I don't know if that's, yeah, I'm assuming that's on purpose.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like on purpose. That's guiding, obviously guiding a
Yeah, yeah.
conversation to
Nobody in
ensure.
there is there to get her in trouble.
Yeah,
There's clearly no bad guy, no bad cop in the room. So
yeah, it's all good cops for her.
yeah,
They're guiding her conversation so she doesn't perjure herself. Uh, because then somebody can question it and come back and go, yeah, hey, she
right.
perjured
And
herself
she's
here.
very good. She's very good at how she words things so as not to perjure herself. So anytime she says something that's a specific fact, factoid, she will say, "That's what that person told me." She will never come up with the thought on her own. She will associate the thought as having been given to her by someone else, so that if that comes back and it is inaccurate, it doesn't come back on her. And there's a lot
Okay.
of them.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, she's very good at what she does. She's had a lot of practice. I'm sure she's had a lot of time with her lawyers. She's got a lot of money. She's had the lawyers the entire time she's been in prison, and she's been in contact with them. So this is 4 years of planning.
Yeah. So
So
let's get into it then.
okay, all right. So the first thing I would say, let's see. Yeah, so he's cutting off. But the first thing I would say is she presents herself as being very weak and very meek, right? Very, I didn't know, I was in the wrong place, but I didn't realize, these things were very, very hard for me. I was going through a lot, and you know, periodically gets emotional and has to stop. And when she has to stop, they then don't pick up on what she was saying. They move to a new topic. So that's another way that she manipulates the conversation. I don't know if that's if that was practice ahead of time. I was like, if I do this, we move on. I don't know. She talks a lot about um, how she's never been contacted. I mean, because she went to prison based on the Virginia Giuffre stuff, but she was never subpoenaed in any of Epstein's trials. And I think that's probably true. I don't think that's a lie, and that has a lot to do with the same reason why they haven't really interviewed anybody for those trials. I mean, it's the same thing as we say with the women, where if we believed women, we wouldn't need the Epstein files. If we interviewed men, we probably wouldn't need them either. But they didn't do that. And they didn't interview any of the bad guys, quote unquote, for this trial. Like, I'm just wondering how little information they had to convict him. Which he didn't, he obviously didn't go through this whole trial. He killed himself before then,
Yeah.
or however you want to look at that.
Yeah.
So
Something
he did.
happened where he's no longer here.
Yes, he is no longer alive. Um, she has an interesting conversation about her dad.
Okay.
And what? So let me backtrack. So she has lots of, this idea of she's meek and she's targeted. And one of those things that she brings up is that she was on an IRA, which is the Irish Republican Army. She was on a hit list when she was a little girl. Doesn't go into details. They don't ask her details about why would you be on an IRA hit list as a small child. Um, and so she says her father didn't want her out of the sight, didn't want her out of the country, wanted her like with him all the time. He was very protective of her. She was the youngest in her family. She was obviously the favorite. Um, I found that statement very interesting because as soon as he died, and we'll go into why and how he died, but as soon as he died, her family shipped her off to the US to protect her from the press, in England and all the stuff surrounding her father's death. And I thought that feels counterintuitive to the idea that she had an IRA target on her back, and that her father didn't want her to go anywhere. So I felt that didn't make sense to me. When she was asked about her father, one of the questions she was asked was about if he was involved in intelligence, which is a big question. It's a big question with Jeffrey Epstein. What she says, she's very cagey, but what she says, she didn't think he was employed formally by any agency, but he was in British intelligence during the war, World War II. And once you've been an intelligence officer, this is a quote, you're kind of always ... And that's where she left it. And so she said, if you're asking me if I thought he did help people, the answer is yes, I do. And that's how she worded it. So she didn't say my father was an intelligence. She just said that, like, I didn't know, I don't know, but sometimes people are and they like to help people, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's a pretty clear answer. Um, she says that her father never knew Jeffrey Epstein, never met Jeffrey Epstein, didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein. The only information that he had was he called, or she called and said, "Daddy, I'm dating somebody," as girls do.
Hmm.
And so what he did is he heard that Jeffrey Epstein worked at Bear Stearns, so he called his buddy Alan Greenberg to make sure he was like not a criminal. Well, Alan Greenberg was a father of a student when Jeffrey Epstein worked at the Dalton School and was like fast friends with Jeffrey Epstein at the Dalton School in the 70s and gave Jeffrey Epstein a job at Bear Stearns. So, like, if Robert Maxwell is best friends with Alan Greenberg and Jeffrey Epstein is best friends with Alan Greenberg, but yet Robert Maxwell has no idea who Jeffrey Epstein is, again, shady. That
Shady. Yeah,
doesn't
it
line
doesn't
up
make
for me at
sense.
all. At all. But her dad calls back and says, he's totally safe. You can date him. Okay. Didn't do your research. Um, so she claims that she met Epstein through a friend, that she just broken up from like an engagement. She just got into the US. Her dad had died. So the issue with her dad, he's very much a Jeffrey Epstein figure. He was kind of he was very wealthy. He owned a lot of different publishing houses. He owned the British Macmillan publishing house and the Daily Mirror and all these tabloids. Um, and toward the end of his life, they found out that he had been money laundering all this cash out of his employees, like retirement benefits, and to the tune of like $500 million. Like, he'd taken all their money, like, yeah, like day laborers, like 9 to 5ers. Um, and then he was out on his yacht, which is called the Lady Ghislaine. It's a super yacht. It's not a regular yacht. And they found him floating naked in the Atlantic. So, in his own newspapers, the headline was he died of a heart attack when he was out teeing in the middle of the night. He owed a lot of money to a lot of people. Um, After that, she went to the US again, this time to move, and she met Jeffrey Epstein, and she said she had sex with him one time, and that she thought that meant they were dating. Like, she plays this very simpering person. Like, she thought they were dating, she thought they were gonna get married, she thought they were gonna have babies. And then she found out he was like dating someone else. She said she didn't know anything about him and that he hired her on to like help them find a house because that's what she'd been doing for her father the first time she was in New York, was to find him a place. Um, and she found him a house and she goes, but it's, the rent is 12,000 a month. You can't afford it. And he goes, oh yes, I can. And it's one of those situations where there's many that she describes throughout this interview that she asks no questions. Like, she asks no questions. She's like, I don't know if he had money or not. I don't know. I didn't ask any questions. And it's like, this is a person who's photographed by his side over and over and over and over again for decades. Um, so he moves into this $12,000 a month house. And then she said she never stayed at his house. She never spent the night. She didn't have a key. She never went there. She didn't do anything. She has nothing to do with this guy, right? He moves, which somehow during this time, I don't know. It's all very complicated. And
But they were dating, and
oh,
well, she claimed they were dating, and none of that
yeah,
makes.
she's so slight about their dating background. I was just like, oh, it's just a minute, and then whatever. I went back to decorating his houses. Um, in 1996, he officially moved into Les Wexner's house. He had been living there a while, and that's the big mansion on the Upper East Side. Uh, that's when Les just like gave him the deed. Was like, here you go. I'm just gonna put your name on the title for free. Biggest mansion in New York City. And then Les took off for Ohio, but Epstein also had a house on Les's property in Ohio, which is where he and Ghislaine both abused Maria Farmer, which is the story of the Farmer Girls, which I've written about on my Substack. And so it's like, all this time that she's saying she doesn't really know a lot about him, or she wasn't dating him, or she wasn't like heavily involved with him, there are these other stories of both of them abusing women and girls, very like
Yeah.
hardcore in different places. She says that she traveled a lot. Go ahead.
Before we go any further,
Yeah.
to before we get into her travels, because I
Mhm.
think this might be a good stopping point for a second, because you got a lot of really good information out
Yeah, I told you a
there.
lot. Sorry, guys.
No, you're fine. No, you're fine. That's. I mean, it's the point is you get all this information out.
Yeah.
People are asking great questions in the chat too. One of the questions that came up that I actually want to get back to also is around like I know you're doing this transcription.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we'll hold this question towards a big answer towards the end of
Okay.
our live today. But is in all of this, are you doing this alone, or are you also trying to get a hold of some of the other um, investigations that have been undertaken, say, by Senator Whitehouse or
Mm.
the congressional committees? And are you going to use the research that you're putting together
Mm-hmm.
now to reach out to those individuals to try and either assist or get more information into the public sphere?
I at this point wouldn't trust to give or get information if it was coming from the White House having to do with these
Oh, sorry,
investigations.
Senator Whitehouse.
Senate
Um,
or White House?
the senator, last name Whitehouse, I think it is his
Oh,
last name.
is
He's
he
on.
the
He's the Democratic senator on the Oversight Committee, I believe, in the
okay?
Senate Oversight.
Okay, is he the one that found all the wire transfers? Is that the same guy?
Yes,
Okay,
Sheldon Whitehouse, I think it is. Yeah.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
I have not. Sorry, I heard White House and I was like,
Yeah. No. 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 Totally
oh,
understand. I wouldn't trust anything coming out of the White House either.
yeah. I haven't reached out to anyone because I don't feel like I have anything significant to offer other than I'm just kind of like digging at this point. There are some avenues that I've thought of, questions that haven't been answered that I feel are very significant that I'm sort of tootling around about how to see if I can find information on them. And I don't want to share them
No.
online
Totally
quite yet, but
understand.
I've reached out actually to Love Parnas to see like what I'm allowed to do, and I haven't heard back yet. But like there are certain things that I want to see if they are on the record to anybody in the public, like if we can look them up and find them. But I don't feel like I have like this groundbreaking piece of information to contribute at this point. But I'm reading furiously through all these things and reports that people are sending out to see what lines up, you know, what I
Yeah.
can dig into more, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Totally.
no, nothing right now.
So thinking of Lev,
Hmm.
and that side of the house, because you brought up something that actually Shalev has brought in.
This all
We
rhymes.
we that they all rhyme. So we hang out a lot listening to Lev Parnas, Dean
Hmm.
Blundell, Zev Shalev, Vicky Ward,
Yeah.
um, and Olga Lautman, and those folks. They're bringing a lot of really good information
Hmm.
around the Epstein issues and Robert Maxwell
Right.
and his connections. Can you talk a little bit about those possible, like what your thoughts might be on the possible intelligence connections from the British intelligence side, and could that line up with Israeli intelligence or KGB intelligence or even
Hmm.
CIA, um, and how that might play into some of these relationships, at least from the information that you've
Right.
found so far?
Right. And I don't have a whole lot of information on that. There are clues. One of the big clues is that Robert Maxwell was buried on the Mount of Olives, which is not your typical resting place for a person who owns a publishing house. Um, it's usually it's usually meant for people who have a very high level position in the government, or a religious leader, that type of thing. So that is curious that he would be buried there and that his wife is not buried there, right? His wife's not buried with him. So that's very strange. I think more of the intelligence side of thing, and there's nothing at the surface level, but there are these rumblings, and it's with him, and then it's with how much Jeffrey Epstein knew of him, and then it's Steve Bannon wanting all that, you know, proximity to Jeffrey Epstein to be with the CIA and intelligence. But I don't know based on how much concrete information, and there may be, but there's nothing at the surface. Again, it's rumblings. Um, but I would say there was something more going on than, especially when you think of finances, right? And
Mhm.
how the finances really went from hand to hand to hand, that could have had to do with that. And the reason I say that is I would say know more about the financial stuff than I do about the intelligence stuff. But when part of the sob story that comes out of Ghislaine Maxwell is that they were impoverished, right? Her family was impoverished. She said her father was like a pauper. He was never connected with money, except, she says, except for his airplane and his yacht, which,
Yeah.
you
Which
know,
you got to be connected with money somehow to have an airplane and a yacht.
speaking as a paycheck to paycheck kind of a person, we don't also have an airplane and a yacht.
Yeah.
Um,
I haven't invested in one of those yet. Well, I hear the
right. And
tax
so,
credit has gone up for it.
yeah, I'm sure. Who knows, right? But so she talks about that her father had no money. He wasn't attached to money. She said he was born a peasant on a dirt floor. So she goes back and she does these kind of, I need you to feel bad for me stories, or at least relate to me on like a an almost romantic literary level of she came up from the ashes kind of a thing. But she said not a single penny went to her or her family ever from the death of her father. And on paper, that might have been true because he was in debt for that $460 million that he owed the pensions of his employees. But he also had, you know, deep debts from somebody who may have pushed him off his boat. I don't know. Um, so on paper, that may be true. But clearly, with the lifestyle that she then lived immediately upon moving to the US, some money transferred over from somewhere. She claimed she didn't have anything. She claimed when Jeffrey Epstein hired her to work for him, he paid her $25,000 a year. That was one of the points in the conversation when Todd Blanche asks her, well, how did you survive in New York City, even in the 90s, on $25,000 a year? That's not enough. She starts to say it. They move the conversation away from it. Never
Okay.
answered that question. So Jeffrey Epstein has this huge amount of money that is, who knows from where. All she talks about is, oh yeah, he used to work at the Dalton School, and you know, and she goes more into his finances in the second section of this that I'm transcribing right now. But that is a big part of the potential intelligence or, you know, subversiveness of this whole thing. Is there was a lump sum of money that was coming from somewhere and going to somewhere, and my guess is it was kind of this idea of like an offshore account, that Robert Maxwell had that then got transferred to Epstein, that, or via his daughter, however that worked. But it was a massive amount of money. And so intelligence, I don't know. But he was connected to it. And she didn't say no. I'll just put it at that. She didn't say he wasn't involved in intelligence. She just didn't want to put herself in proximity to his connections, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. That
So
makes sense.
yeah.
That makes sense though. Is fighting, like, just so everyone knows, like, part of like criminal enterprises or intelligence enterprises or covert enterprises just in general, um they don't leave obvious money trails. They don't
Hmm.
make it easy to find. It's things where your money is hidden in, nowadays, in stocks and options or cryptocurrencies. But in
Yeah.
their times, it was in buildings and in boats and in planes,
Construction was a big one. When you hear the word
construction
construction,
businesses.
that's like the mafia, but this wasn't supposedly the mafia, but they all had
Yeah.
construction businesses. So maybe
Yeah.
so. I don't know.
Yeah. Like, if you notice, a lot of these folks are uh, builders or claim to be builders, like Donald
Hmm.
Trump. In the
Yeah.
network of this all is they own uh, businesses that have easy fronts that are
Mm-hmm.
easily frontable for other things and easily corruptible behind the scenes. And one of the things too is you'll notice none of them are publicly traded companies. Like the companies that these people work for or work
Mm-hmm.
under that are doing really illicit things more than likely are never publicly traded. They're only ever privately owned because the books on privately owned companies are easier to fudge and nobody's
And
there.
fudge and fudge and
Yeah.
fudge. Like this
And
whole, yeah.
yeah, and we know that the associations around Maxwell are fraudsters. Like
Yeah.
that's a
Her
we
father was
can
a fraudster. Yeah.
her father was a fraudster, Donald Trump was a fraudster,
Mm-hmm.
is a fraudster. The Jeffrey Epstein is a fraudster. Even if he didn't defraud people of money officially, like he defrauded people. He was a
Yeah.
fraudster. He made up his entire life
Yeah.
to get where he was. And
Yeah.
so that plays a lot into it. So like Maxwell, she's a fraudster, and her dad, even if he was in the intelligence world, trained how to be a fraudster. Like he trained how to lie. He
Oh,
trained
yeah.
how to get information and gather
Yeah.
intelligence from people. And
And
she
she
would
was
have picked up
daddy's
on it.
girl. She was daddy's girl. Like she looked for in Jeffrey Epstein what she had in her father because she had a weird relationship with her father that I don't know a lot about like on an emotional level, but she definitely was his favorite.
Yeah,
And that was very apparent in their history. But I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was defrauding the people around him who were like these bigwigs who we think of as his friends, like, Wexner was probably somebody that Jeffrey Epstein was pulling a lot of cash from. And not that Wexner is a clean slate and doesn't do anything wrong, but I don't think he understood what was going on with Epstein on a financial level and how much he was
yeah,
giving and not getting in return. Um,
yeah.
Here's the thing. Okay, here was the highlight, and this was what I was, you know, fuming about in my car with late night coffee. I mean, not fuming. I found it hilarious because it was brazen of her to say because, I mean, yeah, anyway. So she meets Jeffrey Epstein. They had sex once and then they didn't date for a year, she says. They didn't get together until a year later, which she was like, "Oh, that was such a bummer." Um, she says when she meets him that he had a heart condition. And when Todd Blanche asks her, like, what kind of heart condition, she's like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything about it." Which it's like, again, if you had, let's say if you had just a best friend for 20 years and they had a heart condition, you'd know all about it. You'd know everything about it. You'd know if they had a medical emergency, what they need to do, what medicine they take. Like, that's how friendship is. Theirs was more than friendship. So she says that he told her he had a heart condition that precluded him from having sexual intercourse on a regular basis. Um, and she says, "Well, that's great because I also have a medical condition that precludes me from having sex on a regular basis." And I was just like, who who are you convincing here? Like the thousands of women that have come forward to say that you guys abuse them, like, and the stories where Epstein was required, quote unquote, to have an orgasm 3 times a day, or like he threw a fit, like, just like, who are you convincing by saying this? Like, Todd Blanche clearly doesn't live in a hole, but also Todd Blanche, doesn't care that she's saying this. But it's like, why, if you want to be believed by the public at large, why would you add that in there? Nobody
Yeah.
believes that Jeffrey Epstein couldn't have sex and that she couldn't have sex. So I found that funny, but I also found it just so ridiculous. And what was the point of you saying that? Were you trying to get us to side with you, like bond with you, empathize? Like, we can't if you say that because we know that's absolutely 100% a lie. So she goes on to say that it is a misnomer that she was with Epstein regularly. She says she was rarely with him. She says that during this time he was dating Eva Anderson, who became Eva Dubin, who because she married Glenn Dubin. So let me make that less confusing. So Ghislaine Maxwell wants to date Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is actually dating Eva Anderson. Eventually, Eva Anderson marries Glenn Dubin. Glenn Dubin was charged in the Virginia Giuffre case for also sexually abusing children. So it's just one big hot mess. What I got from this situation, though, was Eva Anderson was the first Ghislaine Maxwell. She was the first woman to date Epstein and then become his best friend for a long period of time. And I got the feeling that Ghislaine had a lot of jealousy towards her. Like she had the role that Ghislaine wanted, and then eventually Ghislaine stepped into when Eva left and got married.
Yeah.
But then also claims like we didn't hang out that much, we weren't that close, blah 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 blah. And it's like every picture, dude. Like you're in every single picture. Um, she continues to go on to say that she was mostly just his employee, right? She's still decorating his houses and helping him pick out carpets because she speaks French and his decorator is from French. And if she wasn't there, he wouldn't know how to communicate. So she has to hire her to communicate with the decorator. Like really, really lame reasons for Ghislaine to be hanging around. She
Yeah.
said that before he bought the Zorro Ranch, which is in New Mexico, that's one of his big compounds. He had many. They flew all around the country looking for property. So they went to Montana, which didn't surprise me. I actually looked through property records in Montana because that's where I'm from to see if he had tried to purchase land there because that's where like Rupert Murdoch and so many billionaires have massive amounts of land that they live in the middle of nowhere off the grid. So that didn't surprise me. He tried to buy land in Utah, ended up going to New Mexico. She then here's where she starts to get emotional and like wants your heart. She starts to talk about how all she ever wanted with him was to just have a ranch with animals because she loves animals and she just wanted to take care of animals for the rest of her life. Again, useless point of information, not useless, you know.
It's a heartstring point of
It's an
information.
intentional point on her side, but it's like, but just objectively, I'm not a therapist, but objectively, I can pinpoint these times in the conversation where I'm like, that was an unnecessary statement, but I see what you're doing here. And that was one of them. Like, I love bunnies, okay. Do you think you're a soft-hearted person who doesn't sexually molest children now? That you like bunnies. But she said she continued to make for her 25,000 a year. And she said she was investigated by it's called the Serious Fraud Squad, which is out of the UK, and they basically investigate fraud and corruption and stuff like that. So she was investigated by them because she was making so little and surviving, and her father's money supposedly disappeared or whatever. So they came and they did investigate her, but her quote, and this was actually missed by the DOJ transcriber. Her quote was, they asked her, "Are you Snow White's cousin?" Meaning like, your fear is the driven snow. You have nothing wrong, right? And again, unnecessary and purposeful. So she continues to go on that she has no money. Her father had no money. Her relationship with Epstein was very platonic. They didn't have a lot of sex. And then after like 5 minutes, she finds something else to pull us in emotionally. She starts to talk about the impact of 9/11 on their relationship and how hard it was for them and how they really struggled through. And that's when they stopped having sex altogether, even though they weren't having very much in the first place. And then she's like, and what were you doing on 9/11? How hard was it for you, Todd Blanche? And that was just
Things
one of her little,
completely out of scope, unnecessary for a conversation.
right. Like, yeah,
It's
nobody
an
cares.
emotional bonding technique that
Yeah.
interrogators or interviewers will use to normally to try and get information.
Hmm.
But in this case, there's no real information gathering Todd Blanche is trying to do. Like, we have to
No,
remember, he's not
no.
going in as a lawyer. And for our audience, this is like, he's not going in, and everybody here knows this. He's not going in as a lawyer with good intentions. He's not trying to elicit new information. He's trying to craft a story. He's trying to
Right.
craft a
He's
plea.
Donald Trump's defense attorney. Like that was his job before he was the AG. He was Donald Trump's defense attorney in his fraud case that he lost. So he doesn't come
Um,
from a point of objectivity.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
no, that makes total sense. And I've got a list of questions lined up, yet some
okay,
of
go
them are
ahead.
not quite relevant yet. And I want to wait towards
Okay,
the end for some of them. Just hope
okay,
I hope everybody knows I've got questions lined up. We'll probably, if Ellie's got a little bit of time right at the half hour mark or hour mark of the show, we'll switch over to answering
yeah,
some questions, and we'll
okay,
jump off about hour 15, hour 30 if we are able to go
yeah,
that long and people want to stay with us. And then obviously right after we'll put out, um, when it comes available, we'll put out this live for everyone. Um, and we're going to continue. This is just episode one of the Ellie's Exclusives. Sorry. This is our first episode today. So Ellie's Exclusives is a new series on Banner and
yeah,
Backbone that we're doing, and she's going to be giving us her investigative um, tips and investigative reporting and her transcription reporting and the things that she's
yeah,
found through all of this. Um, so thank you everyone for all the great questions so
yeah.
far. Um, we just wanted to give you a second to breathe and catch your breath there,
Yeah,
Ellie.
well, and I bet you we don't even go that long because right now I'm about three-quarters of the way done with what I found in this one. So
Okay.
we may not go past the hour mark.
Okay. Yeah, let's get back into the rest of what you've found. Again, people keep asking questions. If you have one, put a Q in front of your what you're about to ask. I'll grab it, put it into my question log, and we'll make sure to try and get as many of them answered as we can today. All right. Take it away, Ellie.
So,
Back to you.
all right. So about this time after 9/11, so around the year 2000, she said 2001. So it would have been after 9/11, yeah, 2001. She said they broke up because he didn't want to be a father. She knew he was never going to get married, but she really wanted to be a mother. Again, trying to relate to her audience, a room full of men and women. And so she started to date this new guy, though she said that she and Epstein were still friends with benefits. So again, she really contradicts this idea that neither of them could have sex. Like
Yeah.
she continues to say that past dating, they would still travel for many, many years together. They would always sleep in the same bed together. The likelihood of that they were just like laying separately, I don't know, watching Desperate Housewives or something like is unlikely, right? They were doing it. And so she starts to date this new guy who just also happens to be a billionaire. Uh, his name is Ted Waite, and he founded Gateway Computers. He's not really connected to Jeffrey Epstein as far as I could tell, but they flew a lot of the same places. They went to a lot of the same events, and she was always at these places, and Jeffrey Epstein was always at these places. So it's like it's a very incestuous environment, the whole billionaire social slash business lifestyle. So she starts to date this guy. She dates him for like 10 years. I mean, she dates him for a long time. And again, she wants to be a wife and a mother. And then I think they broke it off for whatever reason. Something that I found really interesting in the middle of this conversation about, these billionaire meetings in Hong Kong. And like she said, she would just fly on Epstein's plane to go have dinner in Hong Kong. And she would bring her boyfriend, but she's not hanging out. She's like, we didn't hang out. He just let me use his plane all the time, which I thought odd.
Uh, yeah,
Um,
interesting. I don't know anybody who just lets you use the plane all
yeah,
the time. Nobody's invited me to that,
right.
but then again, I'm
I
not
don't just
filthy
randomly
rich.
know multiple billionaires. Feels
Yeah.
interesting.
Somehow
Um,
$25,000 a year is enough to know multi-billionaires and
oh yeah,
multiples of
and
them.
meanwhile, while he's living in this house on 71st Street, that's rumored to be the biggest mansion in New York City, she's living in a 10 by 10 apartment. She says and she never spent the night at his house. I Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's that feels impossible to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so something that she kept veering away from, and then Todd Blanche would pull her back to, was any conversation about Bill Clinton, which I thought was interesting because he's one of these characters that the Democrats are fully willing to sacrifice into the Epstein files because it's like if he's there, his reputation is already pretty rough. Um, if he's there, then just investigate, fine. Um, but I think from the Republican point of view, they think that that's just a big blow for us if Bill Clinton was in these Epstein files. It's not. I don't think anybody thinks it's a big blow, but um,
It's not.
they
Nobody
kept,
cares.
yeah, they kept bringing up Bill Clinton like it was this kind of golden nugget of information. And what she was saying about him was that he was never actually friends with Epstein. He was really, really good friends with her, though. And so a lot of the times when they would go to these events, Clinton would be along with them, but it wasn't for Epstein's sake; it was for her sake.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. I guess ultimately it doesn't matter. She and Epstein were both, child
Could it
rapists. So
could
yeah,
I mean, just a question on it. Could it be
sure.
more so that they were trying this just a question I'm thinking of. And do you think it might have been a way to try and elicit a response where she admitted something illicit between her and Bill Clinton, to implicate him in something different in a way that separates it from the pedophilia and Trump in
Mm-hmm.
some way that they think is like a gotcha.
I
Like,
don't
oh,
think
Bill Clinton
so.
was in a relationship with this person too during the White House time. Like,
Yeah,
gotcha.
I didn't feel like that. It just felt like they just really wanted his name to be mentioned on the record quite a bit.
Okay.
Um,
And
and
that's good to know. Like
right,
that
yeah, and from her point of
difference.
view, yeah.
I'm glad they gave us the audio because that makes a true difference. It's like
Yeah,
we
and I
can
don't there
glean
was no
that.
indication that there was any relationship. I mean, from her point of view, that there was any relationship with Bill Clinton. But what she continues to say about Epstein is so similar to what we think about with Donald Trump is that he had no actual friends. His ability to socialize and yeah, just like have a social life and have friendships and be empathetic and like hang out and relax and like go to parties didn't exist. Like he didn't know how to do that. He had helpers and he had people around him, which I found that really interesting because when I think you read these articles about Epstein, like especially the ones from before his arrest, they're very glowing and they make him sound very like big man on campus and like the popular guy. And, all the Harvard professors are giving them everything because they just want to be close to greatness and he's friends with Hollywood. And it's like, that doesn't really match up with the idea of somebody who doesn't know how to talk to you, like who
Yeah.
doesn't eat in restaurants. He refused to eat in restaurants because he thought it was, unsavory or unsanitary. He thought it was like eating at the
Which is
subway.
which interesting you say that because that's actually
Hmm.
something Donald Trump has talked about too,
Yeah.
is the like germs and like he doesn't like eating out because it's dirty and there's
Yeah.
germs, or he doesn't like showers of gold and that sort of stuff. And he told Melania that because of germs. Yet,
Yeah.
I mean, pee just happens
Yeah.
to be sterile.
They,
So no germs there, but
yeah. You just think about all the lifestyle that they're living with these people coming in and out of their house in massive numbers that probably they were scared of germs, right? It's like,
yeah,
you hear and I've mentioned this before, I think when we were talking, but like that was one of the things in some of these depositions about Trump that was an individual piece of information that different girls and women were saying without talking to each other and without being influenced was that Trump makes them put on gloves before they sexually like pleased him. And that was a very unique piece of information, but like they all said it. And so that gives a lot of credibility, right, to
yeah,
these people. And yeah, and the idea that of him being a germaphobe. But Jeffrey Epstein was all about money, but he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know how to be a rich person. So, like, if you listen to some of the interviews with Michael Wolff, who was one of the people that, for whatever reason, Epstein trusted, he's a great journalist. Um, he would walk into Epstein's house and it was almost like a hoarder's house of expensive things. Like nothing worked together. It was just animal print and like statues hanging from the ceiling and like really cheap pictures and really expensive frames. And he would have to go around and say like this costs this much and look over here, this costs this much. And it was like a person who had just won the lottery. and
Yeah.
that's kind of where he came from. He came from a very lower middle class life in Brooklyn growing up. And so it doesn't make sense that he had $1 billion. Nobody knows how he had $1 billion or if it was all a ruse and he didn't have $1 billion and he just lived this lifestyle of looking like he did. And so people continue to give him things. Um, but I don't know where we got off on that tangent, but she, she basically said that he kept her on, even though she continues to pull away from him and say, I'm not hanging out with him. We barely talk. Da, 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 da. They would ask, but like, did you never talk to him? And she'd be like, no, we used to call on the phone all the time. Like there was a lot of backtracking, which was an honest question from them, which I appreciate. So she did stay in contact with him, especially past like the first case in 2008. Which, if you guys don't know a lot about the 2008 case, I wrote about it on my page. I wrote something called The Art of the Sweetheart Deal. You can read mine, you can read another version, but I would say go find that case and read about it because it is one of the most corrupt court cases that I've ever read. But Jeffrey Epstein was arrested years and years and years ago for much the same thing. He was reported by 36 women and girls for sexually abusing them. He was given a trial, he was given a plea deal. Instead of going to prison, which he should have for up to 20 years, he got 13 months in the county jail. They did not lock his cell. He was allowed to leave 12 hours a day for work release. He had a private driver. He had guards from the jail working in his office. He hired them to work in his office. They had like a book, like you sign into a book when you come into his office. When his 13 months were done, they burned the book. And they said that that was just like standard policy to delete the record, which it's not.
It's not.
It's not. And then when he was done with his 13 months, which was barely any time in jail, he basically just slept in jail. He had to go on house arrest, but because he had houses all over the world, he was allowed to go to all of them. And they would let him go on these lavish spending trips because they said he needed the exercise. Like it was the most corrupt case. And there's a woman named Julie K. Brown in Palm Beach who wrote a lot of articles about it. She's really, really great. But if you can find that case and just read up on it, I highly recommend it because that should be where all of this ended. He was a level 3 sex offender after that case, not at the highest level. And he went on to just continue on his millionaire, billionaire lifestyle. And she continued with him. Like she says that she really only contacted him after that because like he was, stuff came up for her. And somebody was calling her from the press or from like the DOJ or whatever, asking for information. She would have to go to him and be like, why are they calling me? What do I need to tell them? And she kind of slipped up and said that she would call him because she needed his help. And then she's like, no, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. I didn't need his help. I just needed to know what information I had to defend myself. And so you could tell that she wasn't supposed to say that because
Yeah.
that does sound a little bit shady. Let's be honest. Like I'm sure he helped her quite a bit. But she continued to.
If a true lawyer, sorry to interrupt, Ellie, if a
Yeah,
true
no.
lawyer had asked that question, or a true DOJ lawyer and not Trump's defense attorney, they would have said, "What do you mean by help?
Right.
What help?
Nobody
How
asked.
did he help
Nobody
you?"
asked her.
And there's this thing when you in like interrogations, and you see it in movies, and it's real, is when people
Uh-huh.
go into that moment and they just keep asking why or how
Uh-huh.
or who or
Tell me more.
when
Tell me
or
more. Tell me
where.
more.
Tell me more.
Yep.
Tell me more.
Yep.
Can you tell me more
Yeah.
about this? Those are real interrogation techniques that
Mm-hmm.
police officers are trained on, that FBI are trained on, that the military is trained on, that Department of Justice attorneys should be and are supposed to be trained on, but they
Mm-hmm.
obviously don't care at the moment. But those are the types of questions where someone like that in a real deposition, the lawyer would have gone, "Stop. What
Yeah.
do you mean by help you? Like,
Right.
clarify.
Right.
I don't understand. What do you mean by
Mm-hmm.
help you? How did he help you? How often did he help you? When did he help you? What means did he help you by?" Like real
Yeah.
questions that are not being asked. So I
Right.
just wanted to interrupt there to make sure everybody knows, like, this is not an interrogation, just to
Yeah.
remind. This is a playwright that they are pretending is an interrogation and they're just acting out. So she
And
slipped up. And
she
that's
slipped
the
up.
thing. And she broke
Normally
her.
that would have hurt her, but it didn't hurt her in this case. And I've listened to a lot of interrogations as well, and they're very interesting because, as a layperson at the beginning when you're hearing someone's alibi, they can sound very believable.
Yeah.
But interrogators are incredibly smart, and you hope that they're good people. You hope it's not one of these situations where they get a false confession, but in general, they're very good at what they do, and they usually know what the answer is going into the meeting. You just have to get it out of the person, and they don't usually last 24 hours, 36 hours. Those are kind of extreme.
Yeah.
She
Yeah, those are
finishes.
long. And they
Yeah.
and just so again, so people know, just for insider tips and tricks, someone like Ellie and I would work together in a team as an interrogation.
Mhm,
Like if they were really doing an interrogation, a analyst or a transcriber of sorts who is able to piece together information quickly and identify patterns and clues would be working with that interrogator and listening to the transcript as it's coming out too and going,
mhm.
oh, they slipped up here, or they said
Right.
this, ask this question, like
Right.
stop and ask. And you can tell it was staged. Like, yeah, that's a great statement. Is it was
Mhm.
staged. It was a just like everything else Trump does, it's made for TV.
For sure. And if I know the person that I'm working with well enough, if it's like a journalist or somebody that I've worked with for a long time, if I see stuff like that, I'll highlight it and I'll let them know and be like, I don't know if you caught this, but you may want to just
Yeah.
my ears caught it. Just FYI. So she finishes out this portion with another kind of sob story. There's several, and this was just a 44-minute section with this much stuff in it. But she finishes it out talking about Epstein's mom, that she didn't really ever get to bond with her own mother because, or she didn't get to spend time with her own mother, who she was very close with, and Ghislaine's mother was actually a very good person. Like she despite the environment she lived in, she spent her whole life advocating for victims of the Holocaust and the history of the Holocaust because her husband was Jewish. She met him after the war. They both worked in the war, and she was kind of one of these people at the end of the war who sort of like greeted the soldiers back. She spent her life advocating for the members of his family who had been lost in the Holocaust, and she was awarded, you know, in her lifetime for that. Was she buried on the Mount of Olives? No, she was not.
No, she
um,
was not.
but
Even though she did real work,
she did
like
real
real
work.
things.
She wasn't left with a penny to her name. She had nothing after her husband died. Um, but when Ghislaine moved to America, the weird thing for me is she doesn't say it, and there doesn't seem to be much of a record of her really ever going back to England and spending time with her family again. And so she talks about her relationship with Epstein's mother as like the relationship she missed with her own mother, which she could have had by this point. She certainly had the means to fly around the globe, but she also had the cash. And so she finished out this portion by talking about how Epstein's mother, who, again, she was like a school aide. His parents had regular jobs, but she was getting very old. She had gotten into a car accident, which had really done a number of her health, and she was in a nursing home. And so, Maxwell is saying how she spent all her time feeding and bathing Epstein's mother in the nursing home. And it's like, she's very bonded with him and his family. To say that she never hung out with him and that she didn't know much about him was just very unbelievable when she has all these veins of like absolute devotion to his family. So she kind of finished up by getting really weepy about that. And then her lawyer was like, well, we're going to take a break, which it had been less than an hour of interrogation. And you don't usually take a break after 45
No.
minutes, but
No.
they took a break. So I just had a couple of notes at the end, just to kind of, food for thought. But she flew around according to the flight logs, flew around in Epstein's plane 520 different times. So that's 520 different trips.
That's a lot.
And that's a lot. And and in the logs, that's between 95 and 2006. And she said she stopped hanging out with him in 2001. So she was still flying for 5 more years after that. She started dating this new billionaire. Then she traveled around on his private jet a whole bunch. I will say that the flight logs, the last few pages of them stopped saying who was on the planes. They left it out. They just stopped um, publicizing who was riding on these planes. So there are many, many pages of just question marks. There's flights, but they don't say who's on them. So there's not all the information is there. She could have been flying longer. She flew to his island also between 1998 and 2005. So she was still going to his island in Little St. James in 2005, a couple years after she started dating this new guy. So, and again, the logs are not complete. So she was very involved. Despite what she may say, she was very involved. And the next section that I'm now going over, it may take me a minute to transcribe, is it goes into the financial aspect of where did she get his money, where did she get her money. Again, she claims to know nothing, but I'm going to see what she comes up with. So that's it. That's what I had for this.
Perfect. And that gets us to a great spot. Ellie, by the way, thank you. This has been an incredible hour so far. I have to say, everybody in the chat has been super, super engaged with us. There's hearts flying everywhere.
Awesome.
Appreciate all of you who are with us today. Thank you. And like I said in the chat with Banner and Backbone, today's just episode 1 of Ellie's Exclusives, which is a new series we're doing. Right now, it's going to be focused on obviously the Epstein saga and Trump saga and Ghislaine Maxwell, as depositions come out and audio tapes come out. One question someone asked early on, and I've seen float around a couple times, is why do we care about what Ghislaine says?
We shouldn't at this point. She has been convicted and sent to prison. Now, I will say that the prison in Tallahassee that she was in, and this is just kind of a clarification because there's a lot of information around. She moved recently from Tallahassee to a minimum security prison in Texas. The prison that she was at prior in Tallahassee was a very low security. It wasn't minimum security, and there's a delineation between the two, but she wasn't like at a maximum security prison and then she moved to a minimum. So just to clarify that. But she shouldn't have been moved. I mean, there's intent behind why she's being moved. There's intent behind why she's being interrogated. It's a distraction. Again, we see this over and over again. It's a distraction because they want to give us information that we already have and say that they gave us information. We keep asking for the files, so they keep giving us stuff, but it's stuff we already have. So an example of that is this week they released 30,000 documents from the Epstein case, apparently, to Congress. All but 1,000 of those were things that we already had. And they said, "Here you go, congratulations."
Here's this 1% of new stuff.
Yeah, there you go. And the 1% was like really dumb, kind of flight loggy stuff that didn't help anything. But that's what they're doing. They're trying to look like they're doing what we're asking them to do. The Trump administration is fighting the good fight, but also in the meantime doing everything they can in the meantime to make him look completely innocent. And it's really black and white. Like, if he's completely innocent, then you release the files and it shows he's completely innocent. Like, if your name is in the files, again, we've said this 100 times, if your name's in the files doesn't mean that you committed any crimes. It just means that you were in proximity, you did business, whatever. But not releasing the files is the most suspect part of this entire investigation. Is not like that made me more suspicious. I was less suspicious of Donald Trump 6 months ago than I am now, because now he's adamantly not giving us the files. He's telling us to stop talking about the files and forget about the files. And there's so many other important things. And he's willing to blow up this country and save this country and like do anything he can just to not release those files. And so now we're going, well, why are you fighting so hard? Like, why, what's the the lady does protest too much, right? From Macbeth. Is that from Macbeth? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Or
he who has nothing to hide hides nothing, right? It's just, it's all this idea of why are you fighting so hard if you're innocent? If you're innocent, like, dump it, spill it.
Yeah. Spill the tea. There's no tea that's going to hurt you. Like, it's all, like, to use the tea metaphor, if you're going to spill the tea and you're not in it, it ain't going to be hot tea. It's going to be iced by the time it gets to you and you're going to be fine.
Right.
Like,
Right. Well, and
so
it's
what's the issue? Trump, release him, Don. It's easy.
yeah. I think it's a lot of things that he's worried about,
Yes.
and the government is worried about. It's not just the sex stuff. It's the reputation. It's his ability to continue on in the presidency. It's and I've said this over and over and over again. If you listened to any of my lives before, it's the financial aspect.
Yeah.
Um, the money that is involved with this Epstein case and the corrupt money has so many fingers into so many industries and has the ability to take down a place like New York City, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's local and national politics. It's many things where people were playing with money and it was probably taxpayer money. It was probably money from charities like fraud charities. Like and we've already proven that with Donald Trump. He's taken money for charity and gone off and spent it on, whatever. He's gone to court for that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of that in the Epstein files. And I think that is probably the bigger picture why they don't want to release anything is because that, if you start talking about money, you take down a lot more people than if you start talking about sex.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah,
So let's get into a couple of these questions.
sure.
One of the first ones I want to ask, because we talked a little bit about it anyways, and here's around purging and perjury.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so the question was, how can Maxwell lie so much when she knows there are people walking around who can disprove everything she says?
Hmm. So again, and that was my mistake going into this. I don't think I announced it, but I thought it. Um, was I thought she could perjure herself because she had immunity, right? I thought she was allowed to sit there and lie. And then I was like, well, then what's the point of even going into She's not, technically. She's not allowed to lie. That she can still get in trouble for. The way she words things, if you look at her transcripts, the way she words things is very meticulous.
Yeah.
She says things in a way that it's not her saying it. It's a person, someone else she heard say such and such, or someone else gave her this information, or she was around when somebody said this. She never says that she's saying something herself if she knows it's a lie. And that's usually a good indicator, too, that something's a lie. And she's not saying it herself. If she says somebody told her something, then that's probably a lie because she can't get in trouble for somebody else having said something. She can only get in
Yeah.
trouble for the things that she's saying. So she's very careful about that. And I'm guessing that's how she thinks that she's getting around something. But also, right now, the only people who are involved in this case, because she's not going to trial. This isn't really like a
Yeah.
criminal case or like it's literally they're just talking to her. So the only people who are involved in it are the people in the room, and they have no intent to say that she's committing perjury. That would have to be up to them to decide that, and they're not going to. And she knows that. So she probably has a little bit of freedom in that moment that she's like, I can lie because yes, I would be perjuring myself, but nobody in here is going to do anything about it. So that's probably why.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. Is because
Yeah.
they would have to say she perjured herself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And they're not going to say it.
yeah, and it's harder for us to then say that she perjured herself because the Department of Justice is going to come and say, no, we don't believe that she did, and that they're the only ones in the room. So
Yeah.
it's hard to prove perjury because perjury is about intent.
Mhm.
Um,
And again,
and
she's not under trial. This isn't a
yeah,
trial. This isn't an investigation or a trial either. So,
yeah. So in another question, sort of relating to all of to this, but more on the Trump side and maybe on on Maxwell's father's side, on the Robert
mhm.
Maxwell side, has through the transcripts that you've read so far and the linking it with other investigative work that you've done so far in this, has there been any uh real explosion of information or ties that are obvious to Roy Cohn?
She hasn't mentioned Roy Cohn. So,
Oh, okay.
and I will admit that he's not somebody. So he and Whitcoff are two people that I just really need to do a deep dive on because I don't know a lot about either of them, but I know they keep popping up. But so far, nothing has been mentioned.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know because Roy Cohn, for those who in the audience who don't know, was from, I guess, mentor for a long time. In a
Hmm.
lot of ways, he taught him how to be as grubby and shitty as he is as a human being. Um, and he takes after Roy Cohn a lot. So
Yeah.
he's a very interesting person in this figure or in this
Yeah.
world. Um, and so those are two of our initial questions. Let's see here. Where this is a good one. When she does receive a pardon or commutation of her sentence, because it's very obvious that that's probably a next step for it, is where do you think she'd be put into witness protection? And do you think she's just gonna go scot free and sort of just live her life wherever the hell she wants?
Well, I think part of the commutation happened already, and that was she got moved because when she was moved, it was right after she did these interviews. So I think that was part of the deal. No, I don't think she'll disappear. These people you have to remember when you're dealing with a Trump or an Epstein or a Maxwell is like they don't disappear. That's more punishment to them than anything else is to be someone who disappears. They can't. They need to have the attention. Um, I also think just because I feel like at this point I can read his mind, I think Donald Trump would hire her in some way, or he would keep her close to the nest in some way. I don't think she's under threat of him killing her. I really don't. I think he would. I think he's just an idiot, and I think he would hire her to do some sort of job in his cabinet somewhere, and just and it would be one more of those things of him like saying I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. It would be him flaunting that idea of like got away with it again. I'm going to hire her to my cabinet, and then she would take the job. That'd be my guess. And then she'll write a book, and then she'll do the whole
Very
circuit.
Trumpy things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. And I didn't even go down that route, and that scares me
Yeah.
even more because
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see what Dan Bongino has to say about that. Um,
I emailed
because
him.
I know I really honestly would love to have him on the show.
Yeah.
I don't like him at all.
No,
I do not like
but
Dan Bongino in any way, but the amount of information that he has at this point and the fact that he has gone so silent and so aggressively, basically anti-Trump and
mhm.
anti-Trump agenda is an indicator that there's something there
Yeah.
in all of this. And he heard or found or saw something that he didn't
And he's
approve
also
of.
been
And
burned. And a lot of these
yeah,
people, when they're burned, they get real chatty.
yeah. So remember Michael Cohen, or Michael Cohen. Actually, that
Yeah.
leads into a great question from someone and I know this is a little off topic in term or a little off and maybe something that we can do a later episode on too, is have you looked into Michael Cohen around the Jane Katie Johnson suit that was filed while he was Trump's fixer? And are there any depositions or things like that that we could later look into that may fit into some of these stories or align with some of their MOs?
So I haven't. I have kind of personal thoughts on Michael Cohen. I appreciate when people switch sides and see the light and try to do good things, but I think it takes me personally, but probably a lot of people, it takes a long time to gain trust back. And I don't know if I fully trust him to just do the right thing for the long term, but time will tell.
Yeah.
Um, as far as the Katie Johnson case, so that's the Jane Doe, that's the
Yeah.
13-year-old girl who accused both Epstein and Trump. Um, obviously, all the court records are online. Her video deposition is online now, and I've posted that. Uh, that is something that was going to be my next actual deep dive that I was hoping to do. And then all these depositions came up. So I haven't done that yet. I haven't connected those stories yet, but that's on my list of things to do next. And so I may kind of filter that into the middle because these depositions are going to take a minute. So I may do that in the middle of all this, but that's very high on my list.
Perfect. Yeah, and that sounds great because the depositions like that, even if they don't directly connect
Hmm.
to Ghislaine and what's going on right now, they're
Yeah.
helpful points of information. Like I
Right.
said, at the beginning, Ellie and I are here just to give as much knowledge and information as we can and bring this all into the light because truth and knowledge are power. And the more
Hmm.
that we have, the more in the public sphere it is, the more people actually believe. And the more people
Yeah.
who believe that what's already out there, like Ellie's already said, we don't need the Epstein files. They're already mostly in the public in terms of the heinous acts that have been committed
Hmm.
to kids and to women
Right.
and girls. We do need the Epstein files for the transactional pieces and for the monetary side because that is what is being covered up at this point.
Hmm.
It's not the pedophilia they're hiding anymore, not the sex
Well,
trafficking they're hiding anymore.
yeah. The nice thing about Substack too is it's a little bit like a co-op. Like
Mhm.
it's not like you're turning on the TV and I'm on the news and I'm telling you what's what. Um, Much of the stuff that I write, I get information from people who contact me and they send me DMs and like I always say when I was downtown in New York and I was roaming around finding Jeffrey Epstein's house, someone messaged me right then and they said, "Turn around, that's Howard Lutnick's house right next door." And I was like, "What?" And I started Googling it and sure enough, he lived right next door. And then there's a story there that needs digging a little bit more. Or if I get something wrong, right? If I get a
Mhm.
wrong, because like I'm doing my best to like really do my homework and try to get things accurately, but I make mistakes. I make spelling errors. Stuff happens. And so people will hop on and be like, "Hey, by the way, just double check this," and that's really helpful to me because like
Yeah.
it's like a big family of information. It's not just me spitting things at you. It's like kind of working together and as a team to figure out the truth, which that should be how we do it all the time anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why Ellie's speaking most of this and not me, is because she knows a lot more about this than I do. And I can guide questions onto this.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate also everyone in the chat who's asking questions because it gives us places that we can continue and build this conversation to. Um, I've got two other questions I'm going to ask. They sort of lead with each other. Actually, three other questions because I want to ask this one just because I hate this guy. Um, and
Uh-oh.
if I want to ask this one, so it's on our list too, is could you investigate Stephen Miller? And his family
Steven
at some
Miller.
point.
I
He's
called
the
him.
head. Yeah, he sucks, and I hate him.
He
Um,
sucks. We all hate him. I just feel like he's cosplaying Doctor Evil. Like he just like even the way he juts his chin out when he talks, I'm like, are you just playing a part? I don't really get what this is. Like I called him the human toe thumb this week, and no offense to people who have toe thumbs, but like he's just I don't get how he walks out of his house every day and thinks this is the best choice for me today. I just don't get it. So yeah, I should do a write up on him.
okay, awesome, thank you. Because I've done some
Mhm.
research into Stephen Miller too. He fascinates me in the most horrendous ways. His family
Yeah,
has
he's
a
just stupid and gross.
Yeah, his family has an similar backstory to part of my family in like
Hmm.
leaving Bolshevik revolutionary in Russia and Belarus and coming into New York and being refugees and having family who suffered in the Holocaust. Like he's the worst of us
Yeah.
in all
And so
ways.
I feel like there's so many people in the cabinet who have stuff like that, and I just wonder, like, what are you fighting against? Like, this is your
Yeah.
history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Stephen
Anyway.
Miller's been like this for a long time, ever
Yeah.
since he was a
Yes, he
kid.
has.
So
Yeah, he has.
But yeah.
Thank God
All
for
right.
the internet.
Yeah. Okay. Good off topic question. Thank you for I
Hmm.
forget who asked that earlier, but thank you for adding that in there so that I could ask it. Um, and these next two are going to lead sort of into each other. Is how can we help further bring this into the public? Because right now, what we're doing is we're bringing it into the public, and part of I'll answer it before Ellie has to is share and like this. And when we send out the video afterwards, share that to your friends, share that to your
Yeah.
family, re-email it to your entire email base that you have of friends and family who might, even those who might not look at it. Post it on your
Hmm.
Facebook, send it in your chat groups
Yeah.
at home. Like that's we're trying. So all of this, what we're trying to do on Banner and Backbone is give you all an entry, give everybody an entry point into civic engagement that is a really easy place to enter and doesn't require you all to have to like really change your habits or do much more. All you have to do is forward an email. All you'd have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's engagement. And right now, digital information is our weapon. Like we are fighting an information war, and the more we get out, the better. So I'll answer the first part, which is how do we bring this to the public, which is
Mm-hmm.
engage and continue engage with us
Right.
as we do this more. The next question, and really the big parts of this, these questions are what will it take to get this brought into the public where we can actually use the victims' stories and their what has happened and the information that we know, how can we gang together or group together as contributors or lawyers to bring more out and get more information and or say subpoena? What are your thoughts on how we can work together?
I think we're doing it. I think all these things are happening live right now. Kind of back to the first question. I'm not great at marketing myself, so Nick is helping me with that. But like for me, when I gather information and I feel like I find something that people aren't talking about, I'm writing it really selfishly for myself because I just want to know, but then I'll post it. But like I never put a paywall up on my stuff because I just feel like I I feel like you don't need, when you open a news website and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I really wanna read about that," and you open it and just like, "Sorry, paywall." Like,
Yep.
I don't think we need that right now. Like, I'm grateful for paid subscriptions, but, like, I don't wanna block anybody from who can't afford a paid subscription from getting the information, right? Like,
Yeah.
the reason why we are here where we are at this time in democracy or whatever it is that we call this nowadays, um, is because of a lack of information. So I don't ever want to block someone from the information. I think as far as like how do we get the information out and how do we get subpoenas and get lawyers and get this, like, I don't know if you guys have been on Substack for the whole last year, but Substack has like morphed into this like journalism hotbed of newbie journalists, independent
Mhm.
journalists, and then people who are veteran journalists who worked on cable news and for newspapers for 20, 30, 40 years. So it's this, and there's no gatekeeping, right? When you deal with, if you've ever tried to publish an op-ed or something like at the New York Times, there's so much gatekeeping. You can't get anybody to answer your emails. It's very difficult, so hard to publish. With Substack, you can reach out and email somebody that you look up to who's like a mentor in the writing space or in the journalism space, and you can say, "Hey, I have a question." They'll write you back for the most part. Like most of them will write you back, not always.
Yeah.
Um, and these are people who have access to sources and legal teams and subpoena power. And they have access to people who still work at these newspapers and news stations that they can then start to get information from or give information to. Like we now live in this space on Substack where it's boiling, like it's boiling over. And we're still growing and the tech is still trying to catch up, and
Yep.
I think there's a little bit of a morphing in sort of like the political stance as we've gotten to be more video heavy, because then you start to bring in the people who weren't really here to do the reading as much. And then that kind of like changes the dynamic of the politics. So I am seeing a little bit more like trolling, like MAGA trolling and stuff like that. And I kind of want to be like, "Are you lost? Do you know what this is? Substack?" Um, but I think over the past year that this website has just exploded. I'm really glad that I'm here. I don't work for them. I'm not like advocating. I have no idea who's in charge of it. I hope they're good people. I hope they're not billionaires. I hope they consider making it a public platform, like, publicly shared and owned. That would be really great. But it's been a space where you have easy access to accurate information. If you need somebody who can get that information from you or for you, like a lawyer, like I reached out to Lev this week, um, because I just had a question of like, is this something that I as a layperson have access to, and I'm just not looking in the right places? Like you can just ask people and find information, and then and there are fantastic journalists who went to journalism school, which is why I never call myself a journalist, but like people who did the hard work, who have been doing this for decades, who did this when there was nothing going on in the presidency, right? When things were very dull, and they did this when things were very crazy, and know their stuff, and we now live in that world. So I think we're doing it. I think what we need to be doing and working towards, we're doing it. And I think it's just that idea of, we were all really rattled in November. We are all very rattled on January 20th, about like, I have all these feelings, I have all this information, but what the hell do I do with it? And how do I be productive? And like, how do I make change from my little
Mhm.
chair in my house? And I think a lot of people came to Substack for that reason, to actually be a part of the change that's happening, rather than to just like complain at their television sets, because it feels very frustrating. So anyway, that was a long way to say that.
No, I think that's great because somebody also said it too, is what Heather Cox Richardson also said is we're a new news community and it's
Hmm.
also it's citizen journalism at its
Yeah.
finest.
Yeah. I
It's
like that term, citizen
citizens
journalism.
it's citizens stepping up to re-engage actively for
Hmm.
others to see and others to join into. And
Yeah.
that's all we are is we're concerned citizens who are jumping in and we are reaching out with our network and with ourselves to others who are big in this area and who have a lot of information and who can help us also get into spaces so that we can talk to more people, get the victim stories out, dig deep into what's going on, and actually find
Mhm.
the truth in all of this. So we are reaching out to folks like Zev Shalev and Lev Parnas. And as you've seen, I've spoken with Dean Blundell. And he's not someone who's, say, an investigative journalist into Epstein, but the group of people that we're building around and building with and talking to are those that you all trust too, and know that they have information that is useful and is trustworthy and simple. And we want to be able to connect Ellie with them specifically, because I know Zev Shalev is doing an incredible job in the financial side.
Hmm.
And as you're digging in on the next set of depositions through the financial piece, I think that would be a really cool blend of information
Yeah.
and questions we might be able to ask between the two of you. So we're going to continue to reach out to other creators in the community. The more you all share this too, that helps us get into those spaces easier because it shows that people are listening and trust us
Yeah.
too. Um, and that we have something to offer. And Ellie does have something to offer. Like you can
You
see
have
Ellie
something to offer too.
independently. Oh, thank you. Ellie does have something to offer, and I'm blowing you up here, Ellie, because you deserve it.
Thank
Like
you.
this is
Thank
the
you.
this is the Ellie's exclusives show for a reason. Um, because Ellie has a lot of really, really powerful information that can come out, needs to come out, and you're very good at getting it out in a way that people understand. And I hope to help facilitate getting that out with you. Because that's what we need. We need people to be informed right now.
Hmm.
So whatever we can do here, our first step for everyone is share this. Just share it with a friend, and tag your favorite creators and things too. Like Ellie
Sure.
said, this is a big community, and we
Yeah.
tag and talk to creators too. Like it's important and give comments and feedback. So I'm gonna,
Well, that was another thing
uh,
I was going to say really quick,
yeah.
is I don't think you have to have a Substack account in order to read something. So if you did send it to like a family member or whatever, they should be able to read an article without being a Substack member or even on the website at all. So I think that there shouldn't be any sort of block there.
Yeah. And we're also working on getting our YouTube channel set up. So stick with us there as we're expanding to be able to get Banner and Backbone's YouTube channel up. Today is our last day of the Banner and Backbone launch sale for 80% off. And all proceeds from this initial launch period are going directly towards litigation efforts, subpoena efforts, and pro-democracy efforts to get the truth out. So if you join today as a paid subscriber on Banner and Backbone, please become a paid subscriber and help us get as much financial support out as we can and resources out to those who are doing the litigations that will help get these truths out. So Ellie, anything else you'd like to say before we let the people go?
I think that's it on my end.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us
Bye,
today
guys.
for our first episode of Ellie's Exclusives on the Banner and Backbone Media Network. And we hope to see y'all again soon. We will be back soon with more episodes.
Yeah, I gotta be some more transcribing.
As Ellie gets things transcribed. So stick with us. We'll get emails out as new episodes are on the schedule. And we look forward to having everyone with us again. Thank you so much. Thank you,
All
Ellie.
right, I'll see you later.
And
Bye, guys.
have a great Sunday, y'all. Thanks.